I wanted to start by introducing myself in just a slightly different way, because special collections librarian doesn't always clearly indicate what that means or where it's come from, because there's so many different paths to special collections librarianship. Mine, I actually majored in art history and art education, and my first intention was to teach junior high art. And I do think that that links to the topic that we're going to talk about today, because three of the things that that has at its core is catching students right when they're thinking about the big questions. What is art? Why do we tell stories? What is history? Why do we create things? Why does any of this matter? And tie it together with the act of making things, the dangerous act of making things right at the age when we clothe ourselves in sarcasm. And I think that that ties into what I find to be my core mission, my core goal with Special Collections Outreach. I'm here to give a very standard talk today. We've had some incredible international press coverage of some of our social media efforts, of our efforts to get the message out there about what we have and why it matters. And so the talk that stems from that is, we got international press coverage. What have we been doing? What worked? How did all of that come to be? And I have slides on that today. But what I find interesting is the bigger question that's at the heart of that is, why do we do any of this? Why do we have Special Collections Outreach? And what is the message of Special Collections Outreach? I find that it has at its heart a message of, you can keep asking why. Why do we have Special Collections Outreach? Well, we have these really great collections that people can use for research, that people value. But why do we have these collections? Why do we keep things from the past? You know, why is it that we try to remember our history? What that has at its heart a type of storytelling, but why do we tell stories? Why do we make things in the first place? You can see how I find a link to what I was doing trying to teach junior high art in those same questions. Why is it that we keep collections in the first place? That's part of what I'm trying to communicate. And that ties into some of the messages that we hear assaulting us every day. You know, we're facing the death of the book. You know, MOOCs will kill education. You know, there's a lot of these really negative messages that are out there that I find that this really hits at the heart. Why do we care about this stuff? So I'm always trying to answer, even with a little animation of a book, I'm trying to answer some of that question of why this matters. What do we have? Why do we do it? Why do we care for our things? How do we do it? And just what does this all mean and why does it matter? I think I said why does it matter about 900 times. You can tell that I really care about that. I love this quote, and I want to start with this one. This is from Ann Boddy. She's a Special Collections librarian. I hope to see an age of radical access soon where we pour energy into making our collections as discoverable and usable as possible. We've worked hard to digitize and inform others of our collections, but researchers often find it difficult to locate our materials, and discovery tools that make the process as easy and rewarding as possible are really needed. And then you add this quote is already starting from the assumption that somebody's looking for your materials. So I'm actually one step before this, and I'm thinking about how can I get the message out there to people who have no idea that we exist and have no idea that they'd have a reason to care about any of our materials. So at the heart of this, I think about this all the time.
What is that?
What is that? Mr. Theisen, what is that? What do you see when you see that?
I see the stereotypes of special collections and other research-based archives and institutions.
Mm-hmm.
You have the dusty old books, you have the dude in his twill jacket, you have the...
It's not just a dude. That's fine.
Whatever.
We can leave it there for now.
You have oddly hot librarian on top with her book reaching out.
Wait, what do you mean oddly about librarian?
I don't know.
You mean that's the traditional image of a librarian?
Yeah. So the other thing that I'm trying to do with Special Collections, this goal. So we're getting at the goal, and then we're going to get at what we're doing and why and what's working. In general, if I say to you, what is Special Collections? When you hear Special Collections, what is it that you think of?
Old books.
Old books. Good. We have old things. Anything else?
closed room with limited access.
A closed room with limited access. We've got old things, expensive things that might be dangerous to touch. A closed room, expensive things, and white gloves. Yeah, barriers to access. And also, one of the most common answers that I'll get is nothing at all. Is that they haven't heard of it, or they don't know anything about it at all. So I'm trying to meet these stereotypes, change them, and expand the idea of what a library is. I've always had this picture in the back of my mind. I use this in my job talk here at the University of Iowa because, I don't know, to me this starts to fight some of those stereotypes. This is what I'm trying to make with our social media outreach, is I think that we need a special collections where everyone is welcome, where it can be fun. This already starts to counter some of those ideas about uselessness, about it being old, about not being welcome. So this is where we ended up with our international press coverage. But how did we get here? We're going to back up. This is where we start getting into that standard part. So my goal is to fight a lot of these stereotypes. My goal is to get a different message out there about special collections. That's especially fits here at the University of Iowa, at a public university, where the core mission of the university is access for so many people beyond our researchers, to serve the citizens of Iowa, to serve our public. And when that's tied in with serving the needs of researchers, then we get a different type of message that we are sending. So where we started, when I got here, we had a Facebook. And we started in a pretty typical way of trying to build an audience on Facebook. For us, that meant my goals for Facebook were that we could find interesting things in the collection, take pictures of them, and share them, and that we could incorporate more points of view. So often what happens with social media outreach is that one person gets put in charge of it, and then the view of the collection that comes from that is one person's view of the things that they like in the collection. So I tried to incorporate our student workers, I tried to incorporate some more of our staff, because the things that people that respond to and find and think are interesting and stumble across, the more people we can be drawing from to find them, the more that we're presenting a diverse view and reaching out to a diverse public and showing them things that they'd like to see, because it's not coming from just one person's likes and dislikes. Those are my goals with Facebook. With Twitter, which we launched when I got here, it's slightly different. It has an overlapping concern of showing as many diverse items from the collection as possible, but also because of the way Twitter works, retweeting, there's a lot more link to the local, to all of the other places on campus that have Twitter accounts, and sharing and retweeting a lot of their links to relevant announcements as well. That doesn't happen quite as much on Facebook. We also tried a lot of things that failed. So when Pinterest came around, I immediately made a Pinterest, and we invested time in Pinterest. And I tried to think of relevant things. We started a Mad for Mad Men exhibit to coincide with the finale of that season of Mad Men. Worked with the business library, made this fantastic collection of images. That's, fashion, food. We found relevant things, but it just didn't take off. Either I didn't have the language to speak Pinterest, or it just hadn't developed to the place where I think it is now. I think if I tried this again now, it would work differently. But we tried, and it just didn't go anywhere. So the thing I urge with social media is to be willing to try everything, because I think some of our success now comes from having tried in so many places and just stepping down from the ones that don't work. I tried connecting through Foursquare. That didn't really work. I put a test up on History Pin. History Pin's working great in some locations. Ours were the only pins up for Iowa City, so there wasn't any way to make that social aspect for History Pin without a lot of investment, because we'd have to bring everybody else there. And we have collections on Flickr, but Flickr's sort of hanging out. It's not dying, it's not living, it's just kind of hanging out. So we're sort of doing the same with Flickr. Meanwhile, we were having great success with DIY history, where I was learning to talk to the media. They always ask, what is it that you didn't learn in library school? And my immediate answer is that I did not learn to talk to the press in library school. I didn't learn about press deadlines. I didn't learn about preparing statements. I didn't learn about things to say and things to maybe be a little more careful about what you say. That's all a fine art that I fortunately got the chance to develop through talking about DIY history through all of the press that came when they launched new collections. So what happened? What changed? Our Facebook was going very well. Our Twitter is going very well. But they sort of stagnated, in particular our Facebook. And most of that is because Facebook as a platform changed. Facebook monetized. And what they do now for pages, for a business, is that if you just put up a post, 16% of the people who have opted in to see your content actually see your link. So the people who have chosen, they've liked you, they say that they want to see your content, only 16% see it. Until, you start getting some likes, it shows it to a few more. But what happened is that meant our engagement on Facebook really bottomed out. You have to pay to sponsor your posts to have the people who've opted in to see your posts see your posts. So it became a really complicated place to try to maintain engagement without paying. And our undergraduate population, that was one of my goals to try to reach more, isn't using Facebook in the same way that they used to. So there's multiple reasons why we were interested in trying another platform. And one of them that we tried is Tumblr. So Tumblr is a blogging platform, but that doesn't describe it very well. I like this quote from Kate, the lifeguard librarian. She says, "It's the best baby Twitter and WordPress didn't know they ever had." In a way, that actually describes it really well. So it has a feed like Twitter, but you can put quotes, you can put photos, you can put long blog posts, you can put a really diverse mix of content on Tumblr. And that's one of the things I really like about it. It's also exceedingly easy to use compared to some other platforms, even WordPress. I don't know if any of you use WordPress, but I fight with images on WordPress. It's very hard to get images to do what you want, and images are easy and intuitive to do on Tumblr, which I think is one of the things as an architecture, as a platform, that makes it particularly easy to adapt to. And then I love this quote that I'm paraphrasing terribly because I only heard her say it in person. I heard her say it in person. Amanda Brennan, who is the meme librarian for Know Your Meme, although she was actually just hired by Tumblr. Tumblr is about topics and not proximity. So whereas Facebook, you're more likely to be connected to people that you know in real life, Tumblr, you're more likely to connect to people who like the same things that you do. And it's not necessarily associated with your name. It's not associated with your real life person, unless you want it to be. It's more about following topics that you're interested in and connecting to people that way. Which means that it's about fandoms. So, going back to that why we're doing all of this, what the message is, it really comes to the fore then with fandoms. I put this great quote up here that I love, is that nerds get to be unironically enthusiastic about things. They get to just love them openly. And Tumblr is a really great place for that. Tumblr is where people build a reputation in a way from being the person who shares the great content about something that they love. So there's a way to build into that as a library in sharing great content about the stuff that I love. Books, libraries, education, really interesting things about history. I get to have us have a reputation for being the place that has really great stuff, really interesting content, and meanwhile, I get to educate about what a library is, what a special collections library is, by every single post. Every single post diversifies the idea of what these places have and starts pushing at those boundaries and making it more than the dusty stereotype. Why does Tumblr work? There's a lot of things built into the way that Tumblr works that make it ideal for getting a message out. Tumblr is really made for viral posts, and there's multiple ways in which that happens. By being the go-to person who has the great content about a topic, that means that somebody shares it, and they share it onto their page, and they make a copy of it. And then, because it's not limited who sees it, every one of their followers sees that post in their feed. And then if any of them share it, it spreads out like a virus, like a real viral post, and it has the ability to go in endless directions. Our post with the 4-edge paintings, this one that was shared by Colossal, the art and design blog, has been shared 116,077 times. So it has the real potential, spreading out through those networks from person to person to person, to go endlessly. The other way that that happens, so that happens person by person by person from the people following you. But the other way that posts spread is that I said things are done by topic. On Tumblr, what you do is you add tags. You think about what your content is and who you want to get it to, and you add tags. Some of those tags, though, are so popular, like illustration, like GIF, which we'll talk about in just a minute, that Tumblr actually has people who work for them who assign those tags. So if I tag something illustration, it doesn't just show up for the other people who like following historic illustrations. Tumblr actually has someone who looks through all the posts that are labeled illustration or history, and they add those tags. And what that means is that those are really powerful tags, because the people who follow those tags know that the best content is under those tags, because it's not just everything. It's not a feed of everything everywhere that people decided to tag that, but somebody's choosing those ones for a reason. So if you can get a curated tag, you're already exposed to a really large receptive audience who are really interested in that type of content. So that has the potential to spread beyond just people that are following you, but to people who are following that tag. The other thing I love about Tumblr that Facebook doesn't do is that once you've posted something on Facebook, after a couple of hours, it's gone. It's very hard for anything to come back around again. But because Tumblr works around tags, months later, one person will share it, and that network effect means that it'll come back around again and suddenly have 100 new notes, whereas before it seemed like it was dead. It's never dead, it's only dormant. The reason why Tumblr works really well for special collections content is that there's already a really great group of librarians there, in particular. Librarians and library students who coalesce under the tag Tumblarians. They're really passionate about libraries, about books, about anything related to collections, and they're really happy to share content. And it also means that there's just a really supportive community there talking about Tumblr and how libraries can use Tumblr. So we sort of encourage each other to improve the libraries in general presence on Tumblr. I like to think of what we're doing as creating a book fandom, or at least not creating, but participating in a book fandom on Tumblr. And there's a lot of book fandom there for artists' books, for beautiful books, for historic books, for just pictures of books and libraries. And I mean, it's its own huge community of people who just love to see things about books on Tumblr. Also, we're not the only special collections there. To me, I view us as part of really this group of four. Eric Quackle, who's a medieval book historian in Leiden, has one of the biggest web presences for medieval manuscripts on both Twitter and Tumblr. Harvard and the Smithsonian. And the reason why the four of us, and the Iowa Women's Archives now, has just launched a Tumblr last week. My GIFs aren't working. Well, we'll just go to that page.
They don't really work very well in Prezi.
So the other reason why Tumblr is so interesting and works so well is the animated GIF. It takes a format from right when the web emerged. You know, you can think of those dogs and cats and things, little moving animations from, well, I can because I'm that old, but from right when the web emerged. But it's turned it into a real art form, and it's really great for showcasing things about special collections books, in particular artists' books, because we have so many books that do things, that it's a really great way to show them in a new way. So I'm just going to scroll through a few of these. We've started just animating different bits from books. The other thing we have that works to our advantage is that so many of our collections are historic. They're all pre-1922, so there's no copyright. So we have the freedom to work with our collections and really make interesting things out of them. And this is what Tumblr really responds to, because we're not just pushing content, we're making things too. And I think that that's what really makes in the science fiction community, which is really strong on Tumblr, they say that you're not a fan until you make something. That if you're just consuming content, you're a consumer, you're not a fan. It's when you make that choice to change and to make something in response that you become a fan. So I think it's really crucial for us to be making things, because that's how we're fans too. You know, our page is just like everybody else's. That's the Smithsonian's. And we have that group of 4 that I described are the ones that are really making animations as well. So this is a primary way that we try to communicate on Tumblr, is we just try to make something interesting out of our collections that people want to share, care about. And that's the key right there. It's funny. It's fun, it's funny, it's interesting, and our collections are all of that. They're not dusty, they're not boring, they're not useless. They're fun, they're funny, they're interesting, they're beautiful, they're exciting.
I would add tactile, because one of the interesting things about the GIFs that you're showing is that in a lot of situations it's not just like, you know, a lot of miniature books and various other, you know, artist books that have very unusual properties. They're not just seemingly autochthonous, but you actually see someone manipulating it.
Mm-hmm. And that's a counter to the argument that you hear all the time, that everything's online. Or if it isn't, it soon will be. You know, and all of the infrastructure and work that obscures. You know, the digitization, the digital preservation, the description, the metadata, you know, all of the work that we do to make that happen and that render that at this point impossible. You know, it's our physical the collections that we can manipulate physically that are the answer to that. So special collections inherently is a response to that myth of digitization. We can do amazing things with our digital collections, and we will continue, but those have to work together. That doesn't do away with the need for our physical collections, and that's not a task that we'll finish or achieve anytime soon. And cycling back to that quote from Ann Boddy at the beginning, you know, digitization is only the beginning of making usable collections, usable digital collections, and we have all of that other work that we're invested in doing too that becomes obscured by that myth of Google. I think of our job here as communicating about the collections, but also communicating about the people, and that's a really vital part of the message. You know, that part that's obscured is the work that we do, and that's especially with the YouTube videos that I'll need to get to soon, because I'm pretty sure I just keep talking. Yeah, there's my 1 o'clock warning. Let me move on, and we'll get to that part about the people, because I think that's a lot of what we're doing with Stackspeditions. So we started a YouTube channel. In we always start the year with a meeting saying, what are we going to do next year? And I walked in my meeting and I said, we're going to make YouTube videos. Because YouTube is the other place, and also with Tumblr, where there's these great communities that are really focused on educational content, on content that you can be unironically enthusiastic about. And I wanted to be able to tie into that community. These are some of the channels that are involved in that community, so I wanted to take a brief moment to mention them. Crash Course and SciShow both have over 1 million followers. Crash Course in particular makes videos about topics in humanities, and over 1 million people love them and watch them and learn things about humanities and love it. It helps that it's tied into the Nerd Fighters, but SciShow does the same thing for science. PBS has an ideas channel where they just talk about how things like popular culture and Game of Thrones tie into big ideas relating to philosophy and history. And most importantly, the Brain Scoop, which is the model that we're following for our type of videos. The Brain Scoop is a video channel hosted now out of the Field Museum where Emily Grassley dissects animals and really does for that world what I feel is part of what we're doing for special collections. It says taxidermy is part of science, and it's this thing that's obscured that also is tied up in stereotypes, and they watch people dissect wolves and answer questions about natural history museums and what they do in a really fun and exciting way. And then, oh, that turned out very, very small. I put Jenna Marbles at the bottom because she's one of YouTube's most subscribed channels. She launched a channel about 3 years ago. She's just a personal vlogger, but it gives a sense of the potential of YouTube. In 3 years, she's amassed over 11 million followers. So there's absolutely the capability to reach a mass audience with a message on YouTube. Hers is the most with 11 million. These have about 1 million. PBS Ideas channels about 400,000, and Brain Scoop's just under 200,000 right now. So there's the capacity, if you make a message in a fun, interesting way, to reach a mass audience on YouTube. But not just pushing content. Just like Tumblr, these channels are all tied together. They appear on each other's channels. And that's the thing that I think people don't realize about YouTube, is that YouTube is a community. It's a very small community of content creators who are in contact with one another. And making a channel there and being successful is about communicating to a community in a lot of the same way that Tumblrians or communities have formed on other channels. So what have we been doing? We wanted to be able to make videos because it shows behind the scenes, tells a little bit about what we actually do in libraries and all those layers of preparation that make it possible for people to use our collections and just be real people who care about things. So what we did in order to have a connection to our community is that we asked people on our Facebook, Tumblr, and Twitter to tell us their favorite Library of Congress call number range, which we called the nerdiest question. And they did. And then we take one of those call number ranges and we go back in the stacks and pick an item and look at it. And that's it. But it communicates about the behind the scenes, about how libraries work, that real people work here, and that it's fun. And it's a way to showcase items in the collection that we would have never showcased. Sometimes the things we find are kind of dull, but that actually communicates something really important about the collections as well. You know, you don't know when that item that looks dull, just visually, is going to be historically important for somebody's research. So what's next? I don't know. Whatever idea I come up with. There's hope that we could expand our YouTube channel, because it's not a YouTube channel yet. We make YouTube videos, but we share them on Tumblr and Twitter and Facebook. It doesn't have the community involvement to really be a YouTube channel. So there's potential to expand there. Otherwise, whatever I can think of, if you have ideas, we'll try it, so please tell me.